Spectacular views and create lasting memories. Choppers are also noisy, and that noise has sparked complaints from residents across Hawaii. There are also safety concerns, punctuated by a recent fatal crash in a windward Oʻahu neighborhood. Regulations exist, but are they enforced? Are they enough? And how much input does the general public have in adjusting them? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Yunji Denise. A deadly tour helicopter crash in Kailua, Oʻahu neighborhood last April brought new attention to concerns expressed by residents from all islands for years: noise and safety. State and county governments have no jurisdiction over tour helicopters once they're airborne, and the Federal Aviation Administration has sole jurisdiction. Now the FAA is updating a manual called the Hawaii Air Tour Common Procedures for the first time since 2008. Input is being gathered, but the public is being excluded. Tonight, we will hear from representatives of the community and the helicopter industry. We invited representatives from the FAA's Western Pacific Region Administration to participate in our discussion, but they declined. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet us your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Melissa Pavlicek is the executive director of the Hawaii Helicopter Association. She is an attorney and also the president and co-founder of an advocacy and association management firm. Senator Laura Thielen represents District 25, which includes parts of Kailua, Waimanalo, and Hawaii Kai. Carl Mendonça is a board member of the Hawaii Island Coalition Malama Pono, or HICOP, which advocates for preserving and restoring the quality of life in Hawaii. He is a retired natural resource manager and lives in Pi'ihonua in North Hilo. And Troy Scott is a commercial pilot and aviation management professional. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Senator Thielen, I want to start with you. Your district obviously is right in the flight path. Tell me about some of the concerns you're hearing from your constituents.
Well, I think the most recent concern has to do with the helicopter that crashed on Oniava. And Oniava Street is one of our main streets in Kailua. About half the residents will use that street to go out to work in the Honolulu urban area. It's also the main drag that goes to one of our primary high schools. And the helicopter got into trouble in the air over Kailua. We have about, many flights every day in the region. And it came down hard on the street. It's kind of miraculous that it missed any house and did not kill any people on the ground. It was right after rush hour, so we were fortunate on the ground, but all the people in the helicopter did die, no survivors. So it's been a safety concern for years, but it's also a noise and a nuisance concern because it's one of the primary flight paths for the tour helicopters that they take people out, and we'll get dozens and dozens a day.
Do you think the flight path should be changed?
I think the flight path should be changed for safety reasons. We have talked to the FAA about it, and I know the National Transportation Safety Board has been encouraging the FAA and urging them for over a decade to upgrade the standards for tour helicopters, but for some reason the FAA has just declined to do so. And it's a safety concern for the people in the helicopter, and it's a safety concern for people on the ground. They're really a substandard safety procedures for these tour helicopters. No other commercial flight vehicle has that low safety standards as the helicopters do.
Carl, as someone on the ground, can you tell us about what the impact is on your community?
Oh, it's the main impact is from noise pollution. We have several communities that are targeted by helicopter tours, and they experience overflights to the tune of 20, 40, and up to over 100 a day. So that's the main concern, along with safety. Safety is also another big concern. When you target overflights over residential communities, that's just asking for trouble.
Well, Melissa, is there a way to strike a balance here? Obviously, this is a big part of our economy. A lot of tourists take these flights, and residents too. But we hear two sides of two different communities with similar complaints.
I mean, I think we have some of the same concerns. The Hawaii Helicopter Association's #1 priority is definitely safety, and so we're very concerned about safety. The member companies adhere to the highest standards. Senator Thielen mentioned the FAA, and you mentioned they aren't here today, but there are so many other stakeholders to be at the table here, and I think talking about why helicopters fly at the altitudes that they do fly and which helicopters are flying where is part of the important part of the conversation. I know we're focusing on tour helicopters, but whether it's fire, police, rescue, air medical, there's many other helicopters flying. Often I'm called with complaints about noise at a particular time of day, and it's frequently not an air tour helicopter. So I really feel it's important to know that the Helicopter Association is very committed to safety.
You feel like these are all sort of being lumped together?
Right. I think there's some context and some nuances to the discussion that are important to understand. One of the important factors is the military, and there are areas, geographic areas, especially here on Oʻahu, where air traffic control is dictated by the military. So while residents may feel the altitude of the helicopter is at a too low level, it could be that the helicopter is being directed there by military air traffic control. So I think those are other stakeholders would be helpful to have in this conversation.
Troy, you've flown tour helicopters and medical helicopters as well. How easy would it be to change some of these flight paths so that perhaps there wasn't such an impact on the communities while still maintaining the integrity of the tours?
I think there's some things that govern that. As we talked about, safety is pretty important to me too, up there and doing this. Some of the flight paths, as mentioned, are directed by the local air traffic control, specifically in Hilo. There's routes, the approach paths, the same ones that Hawaiian flies into, where they route us in to get into the airfield along those routes. Many times they take you right over a residential area. There's nothing you can do about it. In Kaneohe, an area that you guys are familiar with, when you're transitioning through that area, the Kaneohe Tower, many times when they have military aircraft practicing around the runways, they will give you a hard deck where you have to remain below or above to transition through that airspace. So some of those things are outside of our control, controlled by ATC. There are many ways we can look at different routes and things like that, and the man you spoke about gives us designated routes which we kind of follow. They have been worked on for many, many years through different iterations of trying to fly neighborly, work within the community, what's the least impact, and try to do the right thing on adjusting those routes.
Troy, you're kind of mentioning fly neighborly, which is something that was on my mind as well when we were talking about noise, but that really means flying at higher distances than the minimum and trying to avoid residential areas. Is that something that is
Absolutely.
happening? Yeah.
So a good example, if I'm flying a tour around Oʻahu and I'm coming up the east side, what we will do is we'll come to Waimanalo, where the beach is by Bellows, and then I usually will, because the path shows, we will fly straight to Olomana, which is outside of, not in the Kailua area, and from there, and it's being driven at that point by Kaneohe Air Traffic Control, and the ceiling is 1,500 feet, you must be above the ground. If it's clear blue and a beautiful day, we'll be well above that, and we always do that. We live in the same community. I've lived around here, I lived in Paradise on each of the islands and have heard helicopter noise. So we definitely will fly higher if conditions warrant.
I guess we need to correct something here. And the fact is, on the Big Island, 90% of the area that you travel is uncontrolled airspace.
Absolutely.
All right, so be clear on that you have total control on where the helicopters operate. 90% of the island. And their business model is to fly directly over residential neighborhoods and communities on purpose.
Why is that?
Well, you got to ask them.
This is one of the reasons that we've been having industry representatives participate in a Department of Transportation roundtable to address the concerns of the Hawaii Island community. Primarily is where some of these noise concerns started. And so the air traffic control areas that I was speaking of primarily affect Oʻahu, but certainly in Hawaii Island, addressing noise concerns is something that the helicopter tour industry is very much involved in and wants to continue to have an open dialogue about.
So
That's
Yunji,
interesting.
Actually, you mentioned a manual, and I think Troy mentioned it as well. And I think what's important to understand is there really is no rules or regulations that the FAA is putting out for these vehicles to follow. This manual that's being updated for the first time in I think over a decade, the FAA has told us that is a proprietary material that is owned by the helicopter companies. The FAA will not let the public be involved in it, and while the helicopter companies are here telling you that they want the public to be involved, they've refused to have this process, to have public hearings and allow the public to be involved. And so once the manual is updated, because it's proprietary and it's owned by the companies, there's no enforcement. So you may have a wonderful pilot who is concerned about the neighborhoods and the communities, but that may not be the case for all of these pilots, and if it's not, there's nothing any of the communities can do about it. Then also, in addition to the concern about the manual, is the safety. So the FAA has the lowest safety standards possible for these helicopter tour companies and the parachute companies, which we just recently saw the crash where 11 people were killed. If there is a manufacturing update that needs to be done, these companies don't have to follow it under the FAA rules, unlike commercial airliners when you get on them. So the National Transportation Safety Board has been asking for a decade for the FAA to change that, to upgrade the safety requirements. And this is for the people on the ground as well as for the people in the aircraft. So it's a noise as well as a safety concern. And that crash in Mokuleia and that crash in Kailua, if the safety standards had been upgraded, we would have nearly 15 people still alive. And I guess what I want to ask to the companies, if we have them here, if you are that concerned about the safety and the noise, will you allow the public to be involved in this manual update? Will you hold public meetings?
A couple different things that we're talking about kind of like all at the same time. So the fact that the tour companies are working on the manual is not indicative of not being open or willing to have public input in
But so
other
would you
regulations.
allow the public to be participating in that?
It's not really for me to say that right at this. I couldn't answer that, and I am not conversant enough in the reasons why the FAA is working with the tour operators on the manual. Perhaps Troy may speak to that, but what I can tell you for sure is the tour operators have asked me to participate in neighborhood board meetings, have been coming to the neighborhood board meetings, participating in the roundtable, and open and welcome, have conversations.
But the neighborhood boards are asking for that manual update to include a public input component, and that's what's been shut down, and the FAA is saying it's because it's a proprietary document for the helicopter companies. So I guess again I would ask, would you folks be willing to open, have public meetings?
I think we can take that back for sure and look at that, but I think the key item is this isn't a manual designed to address all of the issues that we're speaking of here. There are other mechanisms for addressing noise and even safety, and the idea that if the public does not have the opportunity to participate in that one manual means there's no public input.
So what are the other mechanisms for the public to participate? Because so far we've been shut down, and I think
we have
Troy can talk
public
about that.
representatives on the roundtable.
I personally have been on many occasions to the different HICOP meetings. Before it was HICOP, before that, even as the head of civil defense, they would contact me. I've been to a number of the HICOP meetings where they had community meetings and briefed the public. We had legislators at those meetings. We had politicians at the meetings. I've been to the home of some of the HICOP people where we took hours to break down the routes, why we went this way, why we went that way, what governed it. Going to your point, a lot of the airspace is uncontrolled. And what we do is we want to offer the best bargain to the tourists, and flight time drives the cost of the tour. So in those days when the volcano was going off at Pu'u'o, we would fly to Pu'u'o, and the next stop would be coming to Hilo and up along the east side. So there's a path there you fly. Many times it's governed by where the clouds sit on the east side of Hawaii. So the clouds would keep you in an area just from Ainaloa down to the highway, which runs along there. And in that realm, you have to pick a route through that area in most of the flights you fly on. I can tell you that we've been to many of these meetings, and the meetings is an opportunity for a lot of the people in HICOP and different people to attend and come up and express their concerns to us and why that's the case. As to the manual, it's specifically whether it's community or non-involvement, I can't speak to that right now because I'm not actually involved with the manual rewrite. That's a good question. On one more point on the safety issue, I don't know where that's coming from. The safety issue in the helicopter industry is incredibly robust and rigorous. The company I belong to was the first to ever be certified by the the Helicopter Association International. They had safety ratings, which was a multi-year program from ISBAO, which is an international safety organization. We have maintenance, 10 times better maintenance than anyone's car would ever have, every single day, prior to flight, post-flight, during the flights. Our pilots are super highly trained. You take certain standards to get to that point. You're given check rides annually, and we do the same thing. Part of the check ride is following the routes, knowing the safe landings, the forced landing areas. So all that stuff is a check rideable mission. Going into Sacred Falls, there's a way you go into Sacred Falls, the altitude you have to be at, and the check pilot will check to make sure you can reach your intended landing spot should you experience an emergency. And that, I think it's really safe. My personal opinion, being a pilot.
I guess I'm going to be bold here. And this talk of this manual is a ruse by industry. It is in place now. The manual has been in place since 2008. It's been in place 11 years. During those 11 years, the problem has gotten worse. There's no question about that.
How many flights is acceptable for a community like yours?
Okay, you want to get into that? We have a noise study that was done in 1994, commissioned by the Highway Department of Transportation and the Airports Division. And they went, this is a noise study directed to the communities in Puna, Keau, Mountain View, Pahoa, and they took readings there of the helicopters, and they interviewed all the residents along the flight paths. And the noise results came out. Helicopters were the #1 noise disturbance in those communities, by far, way over any other thing that was out there. Now, these are in remote communities where we don't experience much noise pollution. And the study also correlated that at 10 overflights, that's an annoyance. At 20, it's an unacceptable annoyance. And these communities are suffering at 40, 50, 60, over 100 overflights a day. This manual does not address that. It allows for the targeting of communities. It's happening now under the manual. And why does that happen? The manual is flawed. The structure of the manual is flawed. There's no transparency, like the representative was saying, and there's no accountability. So without those two things, it's useless.
I just want to clear up. So the procedures manual is not meant to address noise, and the industry is working on a number of initiatives to address noise. One of those is serving on a roundtable with community participants to look at flight paths to determine if concentrating flights in a narrower area is beneficial so that fewer people are impacted, or spread them out farther so each individual community is impacted less. Those are the kinds of conversations that are being had at the Department of Transportation with the FAA and the community. Noise reducing technology and other types of strategies to address noise are very much on the minds of the Hawaii Helicopter Association members.
I want to get some of the viewer questions in here, and we invite you, of course, to continue to send these in. We've got a big pile here, so let's get to a few of these. Senator, this is an interesting question, and I'd actually like to know is who has complete authority over these helicopter companies before they leave the ground? Is it the FAA, the state, the DOT? Who gets to decide how many flights are allowed per day and so on?
So there was an effort some years ago through the DOT and at the state level to limit the number of flights that could take off from the airports, because the FAA has exclusive jurisdiction over the airspace in the federal government. But the FAA actually threatened DOT airports with losing its federal funding, because they said by trying to do that, they were undermining the FAA's authority. So really they have been claiming for decades to have the sole and exclusive authority over the airspace and and the ability to block the state from being able to do anything, because DOT airports does rely on some federal money. Kind of going back to some of these other things in this discussion that people have been having to address the noise and the safety concerns, Congress passed a law nearly 20 years ago requiring the FAA to work with the Park Service to limit the number of flights over the national parks because there's so many complaints. Nearly 18,000 flights a year over the Big Island, Volcanoes National Park. It's been 20 years. Not one single plan has been finalized under that law. There's been some voluntary agreements, but I hear about this, we're participating in discussions and we're updating plans, but it's in the industry's best interest to stall because then they don't have to do anything, and the FAA has not been pushing them to do anything
I really don't think the industry is stalling. We are looking for a plan with national parks, and I think these are some of the stakeholders who aren't at the table today, whether it's the FAA or national parks.
20 years. 20 years.
We don't control whether parks passes a plan or not, and I think it would be to everyone's benefit to have that. Definitely there are limits on the overflights over national parks, but whether or not the parks adopt a plan isn't the responsibility of the industry.
It cannot be adopted without the FAA.
Do you think there should be a cap on the number of flights that are, in any given area?
There's certainly a cap on flights over national parks, and in terms of other communities, of course there must be an upper limit of some number. I'm not sure what that is.
Melissa, I'm confused because from what I was reading in the materials sent to Congressman Ed Case, there is no limit over the national parks. There's supposed to be.
There's a voluntary.
And Congress has asked for it. So that's again
Absolutely.
Going back
the park had worked together with the community, and so they put. What they did is they went and took a look at they picked a year, and I'm not sure which one it was. They picked a year and said how many flights were there, put a bid in on how many helicopter association or pilot companies, how many flights were there in the last year. Based upon this, we're going to do a mathematical calculation, and they did EIS park studies of what the max was, what Hawaii Volcanoes National Park said the max should be. And at that point, I won't quote the right number, but when they did the bid, it was substantially beneath the max. And from that time, each one of the air tour industry guys had to log the flights that they flew over the park itself, and I believe there's a fee that they pay. I don't know how much that is. They would have to pay a fee for every one of those overflights.
And it's not been increased even if...
So we got a copy from the log, the voluntary log of the flights that took off from the Big Island, and it's under 700 a month. So the log is not being kept, and if it's a voluntary plan, what's the enforcement if companies violate it and fly more than what they're supposed to?
The companies report to the Park Service how many overflights that they're doing. And for example, a flight in Kona, you can know how many flights there are. When I flew out of Kona, you know how many aircraft there are, and the flight takes about 2 hours on the outside. So there's a limit to how many of those are. Now from Hilo, it's a much shorter hop, and those same flights go down. In many cases, it kind of depended where the lava was. Was it inside the park?
But the point I'm making is there's no enforcement because it's voluntary, and also the logs that I'm seeing from DOT airports are massively undercounting the number of flights that are going in
I don't think DOT airports kept the log. It was a responsibility of the national park, and they would definitely let us know if we were flying over too much.
Carl, I want to let you jump in.
Carl, jump in, sorry.
I guess there are several things we talked about.
Yeah.
I guess with this thing with the national park, I guess I'm just going to come out here and say it. It was a fraud perpetuated on setting that limit. It's 30,000. We're at 16,000 right now. Can you imagine 30,000? That's unrealistic. That's what they set it at. The other thing is it's voluntary.
30,000 in a year, 30,000?
30,000 in a year. You would like to say that there was some analysis done with that and it was some reasonable number, but 30,000 is a ridiculous number, and they set that.
I want to add to this here. Let me just read these, and I'd like you to respond. So these are three folks from different communities, and they all have a sort of similar tone. This caller lives near Diamond Head, says the helicopters fly so low it's impossible to hold a normal conversation. Helicopters also fly low over the cemetery, which is insensitive to visitors. There's a similar concern here involving the USS Arizona. This says tour helicopters regularly circle the Missouri and the Arizona at 500 feet feet and below. The FAA told me that 500 feet is permitted and that no violation would be initiated unless they went to 300 feet. Why are they permitted to fly so low over this sensitive area? That's Joe writing in. And then Daryl from Mountain View, which I'm assuming is part of the constituents that you're representing here tonight. Is there a legal option to protect your constitutional right to peaceful use of your private property? What recourse do your members have?
You know, the problem is that they target these residential areas. And the real question is, why do you target these residential areas? There's no justification for doing that on Hawaii Island.
I would love to respond.
Okay,
Yeah.
I want to hear.
We absolutely don't want to look at Paradise Park or Ainaloa. There's nothing that tourists want to see there, but you do get the majority of the flights, don't you? It is because the things we do want to see, a flight from Hilo going down to the volcano, it is going to fly over Paradise Park, Orchid Land. There's no other route out there. You're going to fly over one of those communities. So what we do is we've tried a couple different techniques. One, we tried to go a little, in the olden days, because this is not the first iteration. So the first construct was fly neighborly. Hey, be nice. Then we had noise issues, and it was guised under safety.
When you say, and there was a question actually on that, flying neighborly, what does that actually mean?
Fly neighborly means, at the time when it first came out that I heard it was, you know certain neighborhoods are noise sensitive. It's identified in some of the Department of Transportation publications, the Airman's Manual. You know where those areas are, and if you're in the business, you know where they are. So you try to avoid that and stay out of those areas, weather permitting, routing permitting, and stay out of there. It's fly neighborly. Be aware that you're flying over a community, and this is where we live. The whole time you're talking about, I lived in Paradise Park.
Flying at a higher elevation?
Fly higher, vary your routes. The problem is a helicopter has a noise cone when you're flying. The noise travels about a 45-degree cone off the nose. So the higher you are, the broader that cone gets. So that if I go really high, everyone gets to hear. Now the sound decreases and it gets quieter. At one point, there was an effort to try to move the flights more Mauka of the communities entirely, which was problematic because the clouds lay in Hilo in that same altitude. But if we were to get lower over that area, that noise cone would shrink up and we'd go through there to avoid them. And we worked with the HICOP people on asking them what way those routes were. But it's not that we're targeting the communities. We absolutely know that it's an issue and it's a sore point. And what we try to do is find what's the course of action? Fly only along the highway? Because the highway is the noisiest area. Right. One of the people at the table should probably be the Department of Transportation, our Department of Health, and their noise folks. They've went out there recently, I've talked to them many times, and did measurements in and around those areas. What is acceptable for agricultural zone property? What is the noise level that's appropriate? And they've measured with the noise that we make versus weed whackers versus the trucks on the road and things like that. So do we spread the flights over a wide area and every time I go this way, and this way, so it spreads it out, hitting less people? Or take all those flights to a very finite area right over the highway where it's the noisiest anyway? So it's not that we're targeting, and I understand your frustration.
Can you also speak to Diamond Head, because this is a question that has come up a number of times.
Specifically Diamond Head, and the callers are
this
person. Absolutely. Arizona, when a helicopter flies in, you're right underneath all the airplane traffic. The tower says you can go to Ford Island and hold, trying to get through the airspace to continue around the island. Go to Ford Island, hold sometimes 1,000, sometimes 500 feet and below, based on air traffic they have coming in there. Because Honolulu has the Hickam Air Force Base, all the military, all the civilian general aviation, and all the flights. So we get across that airspace, we come to Diamond Head, it's called a Shoreline 6 transition, to fly out and not get in the way of all the aircraft, the jets, and they want you at or below 500 feet, all the way out to Diamond Head, and once around the corner at Diamond Head, they'll usually clear you to climb up and move out of that area. So the air traffic control governs where we fly along those routes.
Carl, I can see your...
I don't want to jump in here because I have a couple other things.
I guess what we have here is a false choice. You do not have to fly over residential areas. You want to. You do not have to. And there is no, you just gave us a whole bunch of justifications. There is no justification to harass and abuse residents. I don't care what you say. Someone who tries to justify harassing and abusing residents every day, every week, every year, you got to look yourself in the mirror. Because to me, someone that justifies abuse and harassment, that's evil.
I would think that my guess is that you'd want these guys to be grounded all together. But is there a happy medium? Is there something?
Is.
What would you like
is.
to actually see?
There is, and there's another island in the U.S. that faced the same problem. It's called Long Island, New York. And their congressional delegation went to the FAA and got a rule passed to fly offshore. And it has worked.
I totally welcome that conversation. You're exactly right, and I'm very familiar with it. There's some serious differences between Long Island and Hawaii Island. The first is that the vast majority of the helicopters flying out to Long Island from New York are twin-engine helicopters. So if they have any kind of a problem with their engine over Long Island Sound, they have another engine which can get them to shoreline. So it's a different platform entirely.
Well, I think that gets into the safety issues. And one of the reasons why the helicopters in Hawaii are not flying offshore is because they can use the lower standard of safety requirements under the FAA regulations if they stay over land. And so again, it's becoming an industry choice. We want to get as many flights as possible in, because that way we can make the most money from the tours. That means we're going to take the shortcuts to go over the residential neighborhoods to get to the sites people want to see, and we're not going to go offshore because then we can have helicopters that don't have the higher level safety requirements. What that does is that subjects people on the ground to the noise. It also subjects people on the ground and in the aircraft to the lower safety standards.
And
As we saw in Kailua and in Mokuleia.
Different topics.
Well, I understand. No, I think the two topics are very much entwined about safety as well as the noise.
So definitely safety, and I know Troy can speak to it, but the reason that the safety issues are for over water is not just a choice. There are some actual safety issues, even with safety measures. So I know Troy will speak to that.
I'll offer that.
And I'm sorry, but we've just been kind of bopping along on noise issues, and I really wanted to mention a couple important things. One is that beginning in January 2020, helicopters will all be required to have a device that allows residents to track them. And so certainly right now you can see on a free app the altitude that helicopters are flying at. Not every helicopter currently has that, but they will beginning in January 2020. And that will be some powerful information. And secondly, the industry has set up independent third party to track and accept noise complaints in an effort to try to deal with noise complaints. It's called Plane Noise, PLANE. So,
but again, Melissa, on those things that we have some tracking of some helicopters, many of them are not flying the required levels. There's no consequence.
Well, that was my next question.
So that's one of the
air
problems.
traffic control.
No, but again, so the point is that the technology of being able to track and the hotline to call for the complaints is not satisfying the underlying concerns that residents have, and that is noise and safety.
Definitely hear that, and that's why we're here. I mean, we're not saying like this is it and that's it. We'll never do anything else.
So National Transportation Safety Board is asking for the standards to be upgraded under the federal regulations for the tour helicopters. And the community is asking for the manual to have a community input. And so again, I just would like to ask you folks, would you support that? Because one of the reasons the FAA is saying no to us is they say that the manual is the associations and the helicopter companies, so they can't require public input. That's up to you folks. And so will you have a public meeting component and a public input opportunity in the manual upgrades? And the second question on the safety is, would you support the National Transportation Safety Board's request to upgrade those Chapter 91 Code of Federal Regulations for the safety requirements for the helicopters? Because it's these lower standards, and I trust that your standards are exceptionally high, and I'm really happy to hear it, but that's not required under federal law. And that's why, those two people ran into the parachute plane at the last minute, and they didn't have to worry about the balance and everything else, and that plane flipped over and 11 people are dead.
I'm not sure. I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure what the safety things are that they're going to check. Every single flight that every tour company flies does have a weight and balance. So I'm not sure what those safety things are in Part 91 or Part 135. Going to the offshore stuff, the fact is, if I go offshore in a single engine helicopter, I have to have certain things. I have to have floats installed, and I have to have life vests. There's some things I have to do. But in the best case scenario, and I'm flying offshore Paradise Park, a mile offshore or more, and the aircraft has to do an emergency landing in the water, those floats are not going to hold the helicopter up. It's going to roll over. It'll float, but it's going to roll over. And you know what Hilo waters are like. It's not a nice place to go in the water. Next, where is the nearest Coast Guard rescue? Kailua. How long are these people? We don't go offshore not because it doesn't make sense. There's two considerations. The biggest one is safety. We do not want to be in a situation in a single-engine helicopter with our guests on board where we land in the water out off Hilo or any other of the coasts around here, to be quite honest. A water landing is not what we want to be doing.
But maybe that raises the question that should the industry, if you're going to be working on this commercial model, to increase the number of flights, and we have an increase of about 500,000 tourists per year. We're at 10 million per year now. We're going to be at 11 million sometime next year, and then 12, 15, and you're going to keep doing the flights. Don't you think it's time to upgrade to a higher caliber aircraft so that it's safe for
I believe
the people?
Going into the financial side, that's not my intent. I just know that what we try to do is offer these tours for everybody. You start getting into it, how many people fly out to Long Island?
Again,
The common person that works at Pizza Hut? No.
again, you do not justify flying over people's houses, abusing them, harassing them because of money.
No, I'm
That
not.
is not the right
Safety
reason to do it.
is what I'm pointing.
Safety, I'm going to call you on this now. You just said why you can't fly offshore.
Yep.
We pulled the permits for the helicopters on Hawaii Island. You know what we found? We found on their flight routes a route offshore that they said they will use. When you look closely, what you will find is if they cannot fly on land and harass communities, they will fly offshore because
Within
of bad
gliding
weather. Because of bad weather.
Within gliding distance of the shoreline.
You will fly
Yes.
offshore. But
Which is safe.
given the chance that they can fly on land, they will go ahead, abuse and harass the communities when they can easily fly offshore. They will fly offshore when forced.
Carl, I've heard you say abuse and harass a number of times now, and obviously that's not what the tour operators are intending to do. They're trying to serve the community and run their businesses in the least impactful way possible. And
Okay.
I really hear what you're saying, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but
No.
I just...
I
Okay.
will offer
not
that
what
the
we're
phone
intending
calls
to
that you
do.
get when, let's
Yeah.
say the weather's bad, let me assure you that the phone calls change from Ainaloa to the bottom of Paradise Park. When we fly along the shoreline, if there's someone unhappy, the noise moves down a little bit. So it's not that it's a perfect solution flying within gliding distance along the shoreline.
It's a better solution.
Let me get to some of these. A caller from the Big Island who lives near Fissure 8 was subjected to 100 plus flights over her home a month during the active lava flow. Caller and neighbors called the HHA daily, but concerns fell on deaf ears. Anonymous from Hilo says, what is the accountability of helicopter pilots who break the rules? Are they fined? Let's say you are someone like Carl and you are upset about these flights over your home. What is the recourse? What can you do?
I mean, notifying the DOT, the FAA, and the plane noise, and those are the steps that we are looking at and working with communities to try to minimize the noise impacts. And so, yes, we're attempting to address them in the best way that we can.
Do you think there should be a cap? Should there be a limit to how many flights that I mean, because it sounds like 100, this caller's saying 100 in a day. I mean, that does
They're
seem
saying
like
100 in a month, and
Oh,
so,
no,
I mean, that's...
Come on, come on.
So I can assure you from our firm, the firm I worked for, that if we got a phone call, we had the tracking software. My owner knew where we were and knew what altitude at any given moment where we were on the flight. And if we got a call and said, hey, someone passed over, this is the helicopter described, that he could determine it was us, he could go look in the system, and we had pilots that were counseled. Another firm I know actually let guys go because they were egregiously violating that fly neighborly construct and incredibly low when they didn't have to. Hopping from the volcano to Hilo over the communities that he's talking about, as long as the weather was good, we would be 1,000, 2,000, way higher than the altitude trying to be neighborly going through that area.
Okay, I want to address this reporting and taking these concerns, because what we have going on right now is this plain noise reporting system, and it is I guess it is one of the most impersonable things that the public has to deal with. And it gives industry something to hide behind. Because when I call Paradise, Blue, Hawaiian Helicopters, their response to any complaint is go to plain noise. We're not taking any complaints, we're not going to listen to it, go to plain noise. I have gone to plain noise. I've gone to plain noise. I've filed probably over 50 complaints. Not one response. I've called, I've left messages, I asked to be contacted. And not once
to run
have I been contacted.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
We have an independent contractor who's operating it, and if there are faults with it that need to be addressed, that's something we could definitely look at. But I think the whole idea that we're just sort of kind of going, community versus helicopters, and I just keep saying there are these ideas about regulations that the tour operators are not creating those. So we're trying to rise above the standards, the minimum standards that are there, do the best work that we can to operate our businesses and to listen to the community. And so there are some other stakeholders that I know, Carl, Senator Thielen, some of their comments kind of pertain to whether it's FAA or DOT or others. But
well, I'm actually kind of curious because, when I was at DLNR, the biggest complaints that we got were from kind of the rogue operators, in the tourism industry. And so, Troy, again, I'm glad to hear the company that you're working for was trying to be responsible and responding to the complaints. But because there are so many operators out there now, and so many pilots that are coming on in that may not be following it, isn't it in the industry's best interest to have regulations in place and to have them be enforced so that the good eggs or good apples don't get spoiled with the bad ones? Because the reality is, you can call as many hotlines as you want or whatever else. It's the Wild West out there. There are no requirements. I mean, when we talk about updating the manual, again, it's not something that's the FAA's manual, it's the Helicopter Association's manuals. And you could have an operator, 10 operators, just decide that they're going to ignore it completely and nothing will happen.
Well, to that end, we have a caller who wrote in wanting to thank Senator Thielen for serving on the panel tonight. Can legislation really be put in place to regulate helicopters? What do your legislative peers think? I know that you had introduced some legislation to try to get some of this noise reduction technology implemented. Tell us a little bit about that and what could be done at the state level, at least, to put in some controls.
So at the state level, we've had discussion with our congressional delegation. They've gotten letters to the FAA, and the FAA has come back to them. We've had attempts to try and do things through DOT. The FAA has shut it down. They basically said they have exclusive authority over regulating the airspace, that the state cannot regulate the airspace, and they have threatened DOT airports when we've tried to regulate how many flights can take off from the airports, and said that's a backdoor to trying to regulate the airspace. You cannot do it. We did put in a bill last year because the Helicopter Association had come in 2 years ago to ask for a tax credit. That did not pass, but it occurred to me that if they want a tax credit, the public should get something for it. So I put in a bill saying, if you put noise canceling technology into the aircraft, then you may be eligible for a tax credit. I think we should talk about, perhaps if these companies were to be upgraded instead of these Chapter 91 or whatever the federal regulations are with like the very bare minimum standards, because again, while your company may be great, other companies are not, and the law doesn't require them to have higher safety standards, we should require higher safety standards. And if those standards then allow aircraft to safely fly offshore to alleviate some of the noise, that's a benefit to everybody. So I think, but what we're looking for is something from the industry aside from we're working on it. Because, we've been working on something for the National Park System for 20 years. We've been working, the National Transportation Safety Board has been saying upgrade the safety standards for 10 years. It's not happening. And so what we need is leadership within the industry to say, yes, we should be held to a higher standard. you know, it's in your interest as well as in the interest of the public, and I think you would get a lot of support.
I believe the
Troy,
industry's
what
trying
about
to.
this? What about this noise tech, the noise canceling technology? Are there, you know, solutions that we could implement that would help with the noise, and then you don't necessarily have to fly offshore?
Any helicopter is going to make a certain amount of noise, no matter noise canceling. Some of them make more noise than others in certain environments and certain regiments, where you are, how it's flying. Most of the noise comes from the tail rotor. It seems like they've had a lot of studies that reflect that effect. So there's some things you can do with that. Some folks have went ahead and tried to find different ways to make that noise go down by adjusting that. I think the industry, you know, to your point, I think the industry recognizes that the community, the frustration of the community. And I think that the industry does two things based on my experience, what we have done with the firm I worked on. Recognizing the need for safety and the fact that we need to demonstrate to our guests and others that we actually take this seriously, which we have always had. I can assure you it's always been that way that I've been there for about 30 years. We went in there and got certified, and all of the helicopter tour companies, and I think all of them, almost without fail, are represented in Hawaii Helicopter Association. The only ones not represented right now, and I know that there was talk about trying to bring those in as participants, was the military, the police departments, the fire departments, the other people out there, so that can be worked better. I think what the aviation industry or the tour industry is doing is they're trying to show and demonstrate through the safety programs they develop that they're going above and beyond what is mandated by the FAA. And the way that we conduct operations, the safety of the passengers, I believe that we're doing that. I think the other thing they're doing is trying to update the operational tour, the manual, and trying to do that. That manual didn't just get written 11 years ago. That manual was the genesis of a Fly Neighborly program, the communities concerned, and the SFAR 71, which came out under the guise of safety, but it really was getting people out of these communities and moving them out of the way. This air tour manual said, let's take that a step farther. We're not going to say just fly out of this area, but if you're flying out of this area, you have to have a check ride, which we do. Not just I'm proficient as an aviator, I have to have a 136 check ride, which shows I understand that manual, I know the routes, I know the airspace limitations, and I have to pass that every year, or whenever the FAA decides to check me out. And what they did too in that manual was we said, we're going to pre-identify along these routes safety areas. If something happened, I will land here. And we just designated those things. And so I think that the industry is aware. I don't think your concerns are falling on deaf ears. I know that you feel frustrated.
Well,
I can tell you.
I totally know.
Please,
I've been in meetings with HICOP and met
I will
many
state
times.
again, that manual will not solve this issue. It will fail. It has failed for over a decade. So please, industry, do not hang your hopes on that manual resolving this issue.
So what would resolve
Now,
the
I
issue
want
for you?
to get on something that Melissa said, and I commend her for it. And it's this tracking, the
PBS.
Yeah, it's a GPS tracking for aviation. And what I heard her say is that the tour helicopters are going to be equipped with this tracking device, and they will be available for the public to access.
Right.
And I would like to get that in writing. The reason I say
It is
that,
in writing.
No,
It's a federal regulation.
no,
I
no,
promise.
no, it's a federal regulation. It regulated airspace, right?
No, it's on the aircraft all day long.
No, it's on
Yeah.
the aircraft, but it doesn't have to be on when it's outside of unregulated airspace. The reason I say that is because we got wind of this, and we are tracking helicopters, and we were calling and telling them, hey, we're catching you guys at low altitudes. We're catching you guys turning around over homes. And next thing we found, Paradise helicopters blocked, turning them off, because we were able to hold them accountable. The transparency was there. Right now, that they're on the helicopters, but they're turned off or blocked.
So
There's
Carl,
two things.
in Hawaii Island, that may give you more transparency, but what I noticed about the ability to see what the altitudes on Oʻahu is, it doesn't yet give you that picture of the air traffic control areas. And on Flight Radar 24, which is where people can download this free app to see it, they may not see where the helicopters are being told by air traffic control.
Yeah. So
It might
is
be a
that a
step
reason?
towards-
Yeah, but is that a reason to block and turn them off?
And they won't be blocked because they'll be required to have it.
And
I want from
never
the
done
industry
that.
that gets put in writing,
how
that
soon
they
is
will be
that going
turned
to be
on.
available?
I believe it's in January.
The ADBS comes out in 2020. That's a separate system that all these aircraft have to have, and it has to be in and on in order to be compliant with the FAA's regulations.
Is he right, though, that it doesn't have to be, it only has to be on in the regulated airspace?
No, ma'am.
No?
So what he's talking about, there's
That
two
old.
things. I'm sorry. Sorry. So what he's talking about is the military has radars that can shoot and see who you are. They come out and see who you are. In the civilian industry, the radar sends out a signal, and you have a box in the helicopter that sends a signal back and says, I'm here. It's different. It's not a paint radar. And a part of that is a transponder, and it regulates and transmits what our altitude is. It's altitude reporting. All of the tour industry has this. The best of my knowledge, everyone I've ever been in has this capability. Now, as long as you're being painted by radar, that's on. There's no turning that off. It's not a pilot choice inside the cockpit.
Military can do it. The
Maybe
public
military.
can't be pinging.
We only have
So-
5 minutes left. I know
okay.
this
Yeah, yeah.
goes so
So-
fast.
It's a good point.
So I want to make sure I
Something
get
that
to each of
I
you.
wanted-
Yeah, but I want to get this commitment from industry that they will leave these transponders on and allow the public to track them for transparency.
Okay,
That's the
my
biggest thing.
understanding is that is a requirement, and I will follow up with you, Carl.
Yeah,
if
the
that is
details of
not
where it
true.
goes.
Yeah,
If it's
I
a
believe
requirement, what does
is.
it hurt to put it in writing that the industry
Right,
will
of
do
course
it?
not. But
Okay.
I just want to make sure that I got my facts straight, because that is my understanding, and Troy can confirm that. for
Okay,
me,
just
yes.
don't block us.
So in the little bit of time that we have left, I'd like to get to each of you.
There
And
is
let's start with
something,
you. Go
know,
ahead.
a couple things, we jumped right into noise and safety issues. And again, for the Hawaii Helicopter Association, safety is our #1 concern. But the member companies in Hawaii Helicopter Association have about 800 employees and families who are community members. You know, we really are the neighbors, the co-workers and colleagues, constituents of all of the people here at this table. And so I just don't want to give the impression that we're just companies. We're real people working in the community and benefiting the economy. And so while safety is our #1 concern, we're definitely listening to the community about noise issues and attempting to address them and going above what's merely required.
Well, tonight we did have, it sounds like somewhat of a solution for you because we do have this,
On the transparency.
this tracking device. What is the best case scenario for you in this circumstance?
Best case scenario for me in this circumstance is for the industry to finally understand that there's no justification for flying over residential homes and harassing and abusing residents. That is a false choice.
Well, I'm sure that your constituents have some similar complaints. Where do we go from here?
Well, I would say if the industry's #1 concern is safety, they should comply with the National Transportation Safety Board's requirement to upgrade the Federal Regulation 91 standards for tour helicopters, because they've been asking for those to be upgraded for a decade now. And that's the National Transportation Safety Board. The other is the industry, if they want to listen to the public, open up the public input to the manual update. Let the public have a voice in that. And the third thing is in Kaneohe Bay, when the commercial activities got out of control, there was an agreement to stop doing the commercial activities on the weekends. Give people a break. You know, 100 flights a day, it's an awful lot. I mean, just fly during the week. Give residents a break. Have alternative overwater flights or some other option, but just don't fly in some of these communities and cut people some slack.
I think that Melissa makes a point that those 800 members are people who live in this community, yourself included.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a way to find that common ground, that there would be, like she's suggesting, perhaps limiting on the weekends or limiting it from 50 to 100 to 50, or where do we go from here?
I think that from my perspective and my experience in industry, we have been stepping forward and doing these things. I think the industry is stepping up and trying to fill in some of those gaps within the community. I know that the owner of the firm that I was working for is conscientious. He believes in doing that. And to your point, we don't turn anything off. That's not something that would happen. I, as a human being flying that helicopter, insist upon super high safety standards. I want to make sure I come home. And I think the industry is stepping up. I think that what this does is help open the communication, and we've been doing this. We go to the meetings for HICOP sometimes, and it's not always easy to do that because there's definite concerns. But we've always been doing that. We've accepted the invitations. We'll continue to work with them, and I think with Hawaii Helicopter Association reaching out too, I think that's going to it's going to develop into a good platform for exchanging ideas and being the fair broker between industry and the community.
We just have about a minute left. I mean, do you think those kinds of restrictions would be acceptable? Would they be open to capping it at a lower number or having no flights on the weekends, perhaps something like that? Is that something that your members would agree to?
I mean, I think there are definitely limits already in terms of trying to fly during daylight hours, not before a certain hour in the morning or too late in the evening. And so, yes, taking that back and talking with the members about that is something we'll absolutely do.
Okay. Well, next steps, I'm sure your office will be inundated with calls.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. We thank our guests, of course, Melissa Pavlicek, Executive Director of the Hawaii Helicopter Association, Carl Mendonça, Board Member of the Hawaii Island Coalition, Malama Pono, State Senator Laura Thielen, representing District 25, Kailua to Hawaii Kai, and Troy Scott, helicopter pilot. Next week, right here on Insights, how cyber secure are you in our internet-dominated world? Are you protected from viruses and scammers? Join that discussion next Thursday night. I'm Yanji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii. A hui hou.